Press the bell icon on the YouTube app to never miss a video from News Laundry.
Hello and welcome to News Laundry Interviews. We have with us Siddharth Varadarajan, founding editor of the Wire.in today. We're going to be discussing two FIRs that were filed against the Wire in the month of April, on 1st of April to be precise. There's a news report at the heart of these two FIRs. So we're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss what it means for freedom of speech, for media freedom, and we're going to discuss questions around media ethics that come from these two FIRs. So I'm going to just, I have questions, but what we can do is maybe take our viewers through the chronology of the whole, issue around. So the story was filed, there was a story on the Wire.in, put up on 31st of March. It was headlined as COVID-19 cases spike in Nizamuddin Nehru Stadium in Delhi to become quarantine center. It's a fairly innocuous report with just details of what's happening. I noticed that it has, the byline is the Wire staff. So Wire staff is when do you guys use the Wire staff as the byline? At News Laundry, we use it when we're not really reporting, but we've aggregated a bunch of information from other news reports.
Yeah, I mean, we use the Wire staff even, sometimes for what's called curations, but essentially if these are if there's nothing special or exclusive that we are giving, or if it's done by, with the inputs of 2 or 3 people. So typically in this particular story, it originated in a very basic text by a colleague, then it was worked on by the desk, and then it was worked on, I was also involved in the story. So they were, passed through 4 or 5 different hands who added inputs. So the Wire staff is perhaps the most common byline because we use it a lot for, stories that, where we are not giving something exclusive or special.
Yeah, and you see that format in newspapers also, where you see like an express news service, which is a routine story that everyone else has. It's not an exclusive or it's not a scoop.
So, in fact, you put it well. I mean, we saw this story as a kind of routine story, quite frankly.
Okay. So now the controversial aspect of this story was a quote, which was attributed to Yogi Adityanath. You tweeted on March, and I'll read out the tweet text for our viewers. You tweeted out the story saying, on the day the Tablighi Jamaat event was held, Adityanath insisted a large Ram Navami fair planned for Ayodhya from March 25th to April 2 would proceed as usual, and that Lord Ram would protect devotees from coronavirus, quote unquote. Meaning that Adityanath said Lord Ram would protect devotees from the coronavirus. Soon after your tweet, Mrityunjay Kumar he's a former journalist who used to work with the Amar Ujala and is currently advisor to the CM, said झूठ फैलाने का प्रयास ना करें, मुख्यमंत्री योगी आदित्यनाथ जी ने कभी ऐसी कोई बात नहीं कही है, इसे फौरन डिलीट करें, अन्यथा इस पर कार्यवाही की जाएगी तथा डेफेमेशन का केस भी लगाया जाएगा, वेबसाइट के साथ साथ केस लड़ने के लिए भी डोनेशन मांगना पड़ेगा फिर. So before I get to the quote, what was your first reaction to this tweet? Because I know, like, as journalists, and especially online journalists, we're used to getting feedback online. Or we're also used to sometimes government officials telling us that, oh, you've got this wrong, you've got that wrong. The fact that Mr. Kumar says that website ke saath saath case ladne ke liye donation bhi mangna padega, it seems a bit personal. So how did you see it, and what was your first reaction? And also, has there been any other run-in with you, the Wire, and Mr. Mrityunjay Kumar? I mean, have there been?
No, I'd never heard of this gentleman before then.
Okay.
And frankly, I don't follow him on Twitter, and I got truth to tell, actually, I got alerted to the fact that he had tweeted by phone from a colleague who said, look, I think you may have got the quote about Adityanath wrong. And I actually hadn't even read his tweet at that point. But I did a quick check, and I realized that, yes, we'd made a mistake on the quote. And so I then issued a correction immediately.
Did you find, were you upset with this tweet a bit? Because it seems a bit like...
No, actually, I noticed the donation, the dig at donations much later.
Okay.
In fact, when in the evening, another colleague phoned to say that, look, some FIR has been filed. And then I was looking for a copy of the FIR, and I noticed that he had tweeted a copy. So that's when I noticed this in the evening.
Okay. So you didn't really pay attention to it.
I thought it was silly. I thought it was silly and immature. And in a funny sort of way, it's also, I mean, my colleague Venu, MK Venu, tweeted about this the other day, that this is a very mysterious way in which governments operate these days. The media advisor to Yogi Adityanath has emerged unwittingly as a fundraiser for The Wire.
Okay.
And
Have you seen
that is
spike?
probably,
Have you seen the spike in donations to The Wire?
of course we have.
Oh, well, okay. So, okay, but Mrityunjay is right about the fact that you got the tweet, the
Yeah, of
quote
course, yeah.
is wrong. This quote was actually by somebody called Acharya Paramhans.
Yeah.
Now, I want to know first when The Wire realizes, not just in this instance, but any other incidents where you've got your facts wrong on a story or where you misquoted someone, what is the standard procedure? What
So
do you guys
the standard procedure that we follow is that we correct the story and leave a record of that. So we leave a note in the story that in an earlier version XYZ was said, whereas actually it should have been ABC. So we try to be as transparent as possible and not try to do the slimy thing which many media organizations do, which is to simply either pull down the story or get rid of whatever mistake was made and not acknowledge the fact that that there was an error. We have always we always strive to make sure that if a correction, sometimes it may be something very minor, like you get somebody wrong or whatever. If it's something very minor, we may not bother. But if it's an error of fact, then it's important to acknowledge that a mistake was made and that it was rectified. So that's what we did in this case too. And since I had tweeted the quote, I decided to append under the original tweet a clarification as to what the source of this tweet actually was.
So, but Mrityunjay Kumar had specific requests from you, which was either delete it or say sorry. Now, I noticed that the Wire's correction does not have a line saying we regret the error. And you also on Twitter didn't really, you issued a clarification. Do you think that maybe the FIRs were a reason, are coming from the fact that you didn't apologize, even though a media organization is free to either apologize, like say we regret the error, or say, okay, we are clarifying. It's not mandated to say that, we regret the error. But do you think in this case, it could have been avoided had you just said we regret it, or if you delete it?
I think it made absolutely no difference whatsoever. I think that he had made up his mind that they wanted to make a big issue out of this.
Okay.
And it wasn't the error so much, and perhaps we will discuss this as the interview goes along. I think what really got his goat, Mrityunjay and maybe his bosses, was the fact that we were drawing attention to across the board carelessness by religious figures such as Mr. Adityanath, or in the context of the Tablighi Jamaat incident, right? So, in my view, I think this is actually the sin that we committed in their, from the point of view. Everything else is just, it's alien kind of alibi.
Yeah, one of the charges is that you're trying to communalize, the issue, because
that's ridiculous.
What the story does is it says that when the Tablighi Jamaat event was unfolding, Yogi Adityanath said that the Ram Navami Mela would go on as usual, which is true. That fact of the story is not contested. It's just that quote. So what would you say to the charge of communalizing it?
So the charge of us communalizing is ridiculous, because the fact is that on social media, right-wing handles and of course a section of the big media was busy communalizing the emergence of infections at the Tablighi Jamaat headquarters already, and trying to say as if this is somehow a plot, somehow something special and unique about the Tablighis and by extension Muslims in general. So for us it was important to emphasize the fact that the importance of social distancing and the importance of taking measures against public gatherings of this kind is not something that religious organizations in India had understood very well. And it was in that context that we mentioned the plans to go ahead with the Ram Navami Mela, and of course Mr. Adityanath's own participation in violation of Mr. Modi's lockdown, which began from the 25th morning, in a religious event in Ayodhya where there were at least 100 people by his law, and where he posts videos standing alongside dozens of other people without any kind of social distancing norms or masks and so on. So it was important for us to emphasize this and provide it by way of background. And honestly, as far as I was concerned, this was a necessary part of providing context and background to readers so that they can understand exactly what's happening, and that there's nothing very unique or special or sinister about this particular incident.
Yeah, and I think one of the distinctions that you draw here is that there's a quote that the story got wrong, but the ANI tweet that went off, it gave the impression that the story was fake. But what was wrong in the story was a quote, a misattribution, basically. The story itself.
Yeah, and quite frankly, the quote is, and this also answers your question about, should the original tweet have been deleted? The fact is that the original tweet made the key point there was the decision of the Adityanath government to proceed with the Ram Navami Mela at a time when the Tablighi guys were meeting, so that there was nothing unique about what the Tablighis were doing. Everybody was doing this, right? So it was the quote, and the quote was quite frankly incidental because the fact is that this was said by Paramans. As it turns out, something very similar was also said by Nrit Gopal Das, Nrit Gopal Das, and it was only on I believe the 21st of March that the Adityanath government finally issued orders that people would not be allowed to come to Ayodhya for the Ram Navami Mela. So on facts, the story was completely correct. It was just the quote that was misattributed. And, this was, I would say, on the scale of things, something very, very minor.
But just to go back to my previous question, and then we'll close it. Would you have said we regret the error if it was some other government, or if someone had politely told you that, hey, listen,
honestly, it's not a question of which government was there. I mean, in my evaluation at the time, when we did the correction and the clarification, this did not seem like something that was a major issue.
Okay.
And so for that reason, and I think essentially. And I think with the benefit of hindsight, when the man is threatening litigation and being very snarky and saying we will sue you, etc., etc., it's clear that the attempt was to browbeat and to demand an apology in the context of threatening. I think is something that again is not a very healthy practice.
So when there were police officers that came to your house, could you just take us through that morning? You weren't there, but just for the benefit of our viewers, what exactly were they uniformed? Did they carry a complaint with them? What exactly happened that morning?
So they came in a black, some kind of a jeep with a kind of tinted windows, unmarked, no license plate, SUV type of vehicle. My wife answered the door, and there was, in fact, when they first rang, she said, "Look, he's not here, and you can leave whatever you want." In the mailbox, they said that no, we want to give it to him, and we want it to be received. And so I guess they came back because they wanted it to be received, and there was some kind of minor kind of argument where they didn't want her to receive it because they said it has to be a mail. And she said, "What kind of a rule is this?" So finally, they checked with their higher-ups and agreed to have her receive it.
Okay.
This was a simple, it's called a Section 41 notice requiring my presence in the Ayodhya police station. And the people delivering it, they were about 6-7 people. They said one of them had come from Lodi police station, the rest of them were from Ayodhya.
Okay.
And
the FIR is from Faizabad, right?
Yeah, one is from Faizabad, one is from Ayodhya. There are 2 FIRs.
Yeah.
And I should underline for the benefit of your viewers that neither FIR actually references any particular article or any particular tweet. At least the FIR, which was registered in Faizabad, has a quote on the basis of which we were able to trace the article, which is so that's the article we've been discussing, right? But the FIR on the tweet doesn't even mention which tweet, when did I tweet it, what does the tweet say? It just says ek maine tweet pada aur wo mujhe aapattijanak laga or something of that sort. So the FIRs were essentially put out on social media by Mrityunjay Kumar. What the cops brought on the 10th of April was a copy of the summons, Section 41 summons. And so after my wife received it, then they basically left. And when I saw it later, I was a bit, amused that they expected me to come there in the middle of the lockdown.
Yeah.
And I thought there's something very strange about this, that they would come all the way in the lockdown and expect me to go there on the 14th, knowing full well that I can't.
So do you know who these 2 guys are who filed the FIR?
Well, with them, the FIR that is against the wire, which is registered in Faizabad, and which has a quote, has a line from this article of ours, that was registered by the SHO of the Thana. So this is an official police complaint, as it were. The other FIR, which is the one on the basis of which these guys came from Ayodhya, was registered by some private citizen. So it doesn't say who he is.
We don't know who he is.
No, I mean, I have his name and address because it's there in the FIR. But in terms of, it just says Nagrik, resident of Ayodhya.
And one of his complaints is basically disobeying a public servant's order, right? Though he's not one himself.
Well, that doesn't matter. I mean, but because, it's his job. I mean, the way it works is that the complainant will say, this is what I want to complain about. And it's for the police to then decide what sections apply. So the error, if any, I mean, not if any, the error actually in the case of this silly FIR is in all the sections that the cops have applied, which is, as you said, disobeying a public official, charges under the IT Act, spreading rumors in order to create a riot. I mean, these are absurd charges.
Yeah.
And it's the police that has to answer. It's not the complainant just filed his complaint and went away.
And the police.
It's the cops who put those sections, and they're the ones who have to explain. Yeah.
The police is the one that has to investigate. And I think it benefits our viewers to understand right now that the initial issue with the story was a quote, but it goes on to then, the FIRs then are not talking about a misquote. They're basically talking about spreading rumors, spreading enmity. But one of the criticisms that, not a criticism, but a lot of the times, one of the standard response from people generally is that when a journalist gets, when there's a case filed against them, there's always this, a section of people, right-leaning mostly, I'd say, would say that it's no big deal and that journalists are like anyone else. And, if you haven't done anything wrong, well, you can just prove yourself in the court of law. What do you, as someone now who's headed an organization and you've had to deal with fair share of, court hearings or having to deal with cases or sometimes intimidation, what is your response to this, that, if you haven't done anything wrong, you can just fight it out in the court?
My appeal to journalists, regardless of their ideology or political affiliation or whatever it is, right, is please look at all of these cases as an unacceptable form of state pressure. You should not be looking at what the ideological color of the government is, and you should not be looking at what the political or ideological, color of the victim is. I have been consistent in my own stance, whether it was the ridiculous case filed against Abhijit Iyer Mitra, who's a right-wing commentator in Odisha, or Payal Rohtgi in Rajasthan. You cannot criminalize speech. And sure, as you said, you can always clear your name in court, but please understand how this process works in India. Payal Rohtgi, for no fault, just for saying some silly things about Nehru, ended up spending 4 or 5 days in jail in Rajasthan. And even now, those cases are perhaps still lingering over her head. Abhijit Iyer Mitra had to spend 20 days for cracking a joke. Right? So these are not insignificant consequences. And in any case, this is just the start. These cases linger on for years. I am happy to share with viewers of News Laundry that when I was editor of the Hindu from 2011 to 2013. Right? So I quit the Hindu. It's now been 7 years. And I still have cases filed for defamation. When I was editor of the Hindu, cases filed by dear departed Jayalalitha, which are still lingering. So
her government was known to use this as a weapon of
but I would have assumed that after she has passed on, that these cases will become infructuous in some way. But there they are, and so the point is that in India, these kinds of prosecutions are launched. The police know, the complainants know that no court is finally going to convict. But if I can ghasito the fellow through lengthy proceedings for 2 or 3 years, then my purpose is served. So the aim of all these kinds of cases is to essentially inconvenience and get you to waste time, get you to waste money, and detract from the kind of journalistic work that you should be doing. And so I think this is the thing, and we really we need to set aside any political differences that we have as journalists and say, look, the use of this kind of police tactics in this context is not acceptable.
Yeah. I think one of the things also that is important to talk about, and I'd like your comments on it. I mean, it's not really a question, but maybe comments on it, that even something as fake news has become quite polarized now. It's become like right-wing media's fake news and left-wing media's fake news. And I think in this, what a lot of people misunderstand is that fake news is deliberate spreading of misinformation. And there's something, and the other thing is an editorial oversight, which is probably what happened at The Wire, where a quote, misattributed to Yogi Adityanath. All of us journalists have made mistakes. And I think the difference between a journalist making a mistake and someone who wants to spread fake news is that a journalist would rectify, would say that, okay, we got this wrong, here's the correct version. Do you see that in your dealings, and especially on social media, do you see that line blurring where people are not able to understand what's the difference between an editorial oversight and fake news?
Look, see, the allegation of fake news, quite frankly, has become so devalued now because everybody levels this charge when they are confronted with news that they don't like or news that doesn't suit them, right? So, and we have to thank Donald Trump, I suppose, for the devaluation of this term, because he's the one who regularly attacks his critics by saying fake news, even though the news isn't fake, patently. I mean, the issue really is deliberate disinformation. So I wouldn't dignify an act of deliberate disinformation with the word news, even if I qualified by calling it fake news. There's nothing news about it, right? So this is propaganda. This is disinformation. This is information put out to actually often instigate or incite hatred and violence. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. I mean, there's so many sites that put out fake videos. And then these are tweeted by politicians, many of whom have blue ticks by their name on Twitter. They never issue a clarification. They never delete or regret or say that this was. They just if it blows up in their face, they just pretend it never happened.
Yeah.
And so the fake news factories and the disinformation factories operate in that fashion. News organizations, if they make a mistake, own up to that mistake, issue a clarification in the public domain. So there's no sweeping things under the carpet, right? There's no deleting, trying to delete a record and pretending something didn't happen. Sadly, I would say that a section of the media in India is quite happy to quietly take things down. 404 errors are quite common, or things will simply get deleted or corrected, and there'll be no record of that. This is not a healthy practice. I think that if you are making a material change in the content of something that you published, it behooves you to take note of that. And I think the more that media organizations, embrace best practices, the easier it will be for readers and viewers, particularly those who spend a lot of time on social media, to be able to distinguish between a bona fide, legitimate news organization and the kind of activities it does, and political parties and others who engage in disinformation.
Okay, I have 3 more questions, and I'll be quick. I know you're probably busy and you're getting a lot of calls also. One is how many cases is the Wire currently fighting?
So the Wire,
you have a count?
at its peak, the Wire was facing 14 defamation cases, of which 4 or 5 of them were criminal defamation and the rest was civil. 6 of those cases, which had been filed by the Adani Group, he decided to withdraw last year. And 1 case which had been filed by Subhash Chandra of the Z Group, he had filed a case against us in a court in Mizoram. He also, when we challenged him in the High Court, then he also quietly withdrew his case. So at present, we have Amit Shah's son, 2 cases. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, who's the BJP MP, 2 cases, that's 4. Sri C. Ravi Shankar, 1 case, that's 5. And Anil Ambani Group has, I think, filed 3 cases. So that's 8 cases in all, plus, of course, now these 2 FIRs.
So what does it do to your newsroom? I mean, do you guys ever think that, okay, maybe this is getting a bit too much, maybe we should just, not, be a little careful? I mean, it doesn't create any chilling effect. I know that I mean, maybe not
Yeah.
too much. I mean,
We are super careful, and all of the stories, it may surprise your viewers, or maybe it wouldn't surprise them, but all of the stories which have ended up getting these kind of defamation cases have invariably have been vetted by a lawyer beforehand.
okay.
Precisely because we anticipated trouble. The law wanted to make sure that the copy is absolutely fine, which is why I'm convinced that all of these cases, when they finally get to trial, will be thrown out. But as I said, this is the punishment is the process. So it doesn't honestly doesn't phase us.
Does it wear you down
It's
as a
annoying.
newsroom sometimes because you have to travel? Or
Yeah,
even
I mean, it takes away from the time that you can spend on journalism. It's irritating and annoying to have to read legal briefs, writ petitions and all of these sorts of things. Because even though lawyers draft them, but they do rely on the inputs of us, right, of the editors. So this is a pain. It's time consuming. But honestly, once you realize that, look, you are being targeted because of the journalism you do, then it doesn't faze you anymore, because you know that this is a necessary price that you have to pay in order to do objective, hard-hitting journalism. And so if that's the price that we know that we will have to pay, then you say, fine, we go ahead. So it doesn't wear us down in that way, in that sense.
Okay, you guys recently published a piece by Ram Guha, which was rejected in the Hindustan Times. You've been a newspaper editor yourself. I think you've stayed with newspapers for a while. What do you see has fundamentally changed in newspapers from the time when you were heading one, or from the time you were working, in newspapers?
I've worked in two papers, the Times of India and the Hindu. The Hindu is a very different kind of paper, because it's the one paper where the buck stops with the editor, and the editor is the final port of call in deciding what gets published and what doesn't get published. In the case of Ram Guha's article, I think he tweeted that the editors had no problem. It's the owners who had an issue. And I think that this goes to the heart of what the problem is with India's big papers. That professional judgment, which is what should drive the content of a newspaper, and for which you have editors, you hire them for that reason. So that professional judgment is not respected. And instead you have extraneous considerations that owners or advertisers or business managers bring to bear. And this has been going on for the last 20 or 30 years. This is not overnight. This is not a product of Modi 1 or Modi 2. This has been going on for ages. But to my mind, I think the sensitivity of the owner and their risk aversion, their desire to not offend the government, is probably at an all-time high today. Because I cannot for the life of me imagine why the owner of the Hindustan Times would want to lose a columnist like Ram Guha by insisting that this article, which it's a great piece and it's critical of the Central Vista, but every paper has run, I don't know if the HT has run, but even Times of India, there's been plenty of criticism of the Central Vista. And I don't think it's deterred the government one bit. So I don't know why the owner of the Hindustan Times would feel that, no, I can't carry this article. So I think this should alarm us a little bit, that something so innocuous as a well-reasoned article on the Central Vista project cannot be carried because the editor feels that if I do that, I'm risking something. So what is it that you're risking? And why should carrying an article of this kind create risks? I think this is the question that goes to the heart of what's happening to Indian democracy. And I think it's not just journalists who should be asking and wondering about this, but lay readers and lay viewers.
And I think, one more surprising thing is that for Ram Guha to have tweeted something like this and the management or editors to not respond to that or just brazen it out is also something, it's a bit alarming that they didn't feel the need to respond to people who were questioning their credibility, whatever, even if it's an informal sort of a pro fora thing. But just to brazen it out is also a bit, to me, it was...
Exactly. I mean, this is the problem. And as I said, I come back to this, like when we take a decision, I'm coming back to the whole, this Mrityunjay Kumar, all this business, right? When we take it, what we say and do is all in the public domain. right? So even my reply to the police, I posted on social media, so everybody can see exactly what it is that we are saying, and that reflects the confidence with which we are confident, we are comfortable, we are confident about the correctness of the decision we've taken. To my mind, editors and proprietors run for cover when they know they don't have an answer. So what answer is the owner of the Hindustan Times going to give when Ram Guha puts out in the public domain the fact that this piece of his has been spiked, and he's been told that no, this is a risky piece? What answer are you going to give? So all of these people prefer to then just duck for cover and pretend that this never happened. So this is the equivalent of when you're caught out with having done a mistake, you simply delete a line and you keep quiet about it, or you pull the article down. You don't, bother to explain to your readers and viewers what the issue is. And I think that this undermines the concept of what media means in the 21st century, what media means in the digital age. Media in a democracy is meaningless unless it has the capacity to have a conversation between the editor and the journalist on the one hand and their readers and viewers on the other, right? This is the great beauty of the digital age, that this allows us to have a continuous conversation, and it allows us to improve ourselves. It allows us, to get feedback from readers and viewers, when newspapers willfully turn their back on this possibility of a conversation, you need to worry about what kind of media product is going to emerge at the end of the day.
Do you guys take a lot of the feedback that you get? Because Wire, of course, gets a lot of feedback, and there's always with Wire, there's always this like, liberal left kind of, accusations thrown at you. When was the last time you got a feedback from someone, say, on the right, and you thought, yeah, this is something that we should think about?
No, we often see. Honestly, I don't look at things as left and right. I get a lot of people tag me on Twitter. 99% of the times I don't reply because a lot of it is abusive. But once in a while, somebody like, for example, I'll give you an example from today when we did a story on the Palghar lynching, where we mentioned the fact that the victim and the perpetrators, the victims and the perpetrators are both from marginalized Adivasi communities. And so
I think the criticism was that you didn't write sadhus in the headline, right? I saw that somewhere. Why did you
in our headline, we said that they were, because the most important thing are denotified tribals, right? So the most marginal group of, and so somebody, when I put out the story, somebody said, no, but Hindus are killed. And I said, look, this kind of argument is like saying that when Arushi Talwar was murdered, the headline in paper should have said Hindu girl murdered. Or when Nirav Modi and Mehul Chokshi fled the country, we should say in a headline that Hindu businessmen flee the country. You don't give religion when it's not relevant here, right? So when one Adivasi group has attacked another, unless you know the reasons behind this, it is idiotic to.
Unless there was a communal angle to the lynching.
Yeah, exactly, right. Like, for example, let's say it emerges in that there was animus between the Adivasi group that did the lynching and the Gosavis, the members of the denotified tribe who were attacked, and we are able to, then you can develop the storyline in that fashion, right? So it's not as if sometimes one feels obligated. You get a particularly obtuse comment. It doesn't matter. It could be from the left or the right. I mean, people from the left also are often critical if you do some story on Kerala or on West Bengal that doesn't suit them. Honestly. If somebody raises a valid point, if it's a point of fact, I think one should take it on board regardless of which ideology they represent. But I think, to my mind, even though there's a lot of trolling and a lot of gaming of social media that happens, but I wouldn't trade it for anything else in the world, because Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, these are wonderful platforms which allow the Wire, News Laundry,
very important for us.
All of us who are small, new players, and we don't have the commercial heft of the big papers and big TV channels. This has allowed us to level the playing field. So you do a video, or Madhu does a story, or somebody does a story on News Laundry, or like the great story you guys did on the fact check on the India Today Madrasa, so-called expose. Right now, it didn't matter that News Laundry doesn't have the resources to promote a story the way that a big media organization will do. But that was in all, as far as I was concerned, I was getting it in all my feeds. It was the most shared, most read story, because you guys, were able to,
reach out through social media.
Exactly. So I think that at the end of the day, it's a valuable medium, and as long as you know how to keep your sanity about while using it.
Yeah. Okay. So my last question to you is on. There's a lot of anxiety among media professionals on how it's going to be for us over the next 1 year because of the coronavirus pandemic. We've seen salary cuts at Indian Express. We've seen some layoffs. There's an expectation of a mass layoff across industries, and you see it in newspapers. Ads have already dried up. You can see how thin they are. I've at least never seen newspapers this thin. What is your how are you assessing the situation for yourself at The Wire as a digital medium? How do you see this affecting your newsroom? And as a media professional, what do you think? How do you see it for the industry at large? Do you think it's going to be worse than 2008?
I think we're looking at very, very difficult times. In order to answer your question about the future, I would say that we need to divide media organizations into two broad types. The first type are those whose revenue largely depends on advertising. And I think their future financial health will be a function of the state of the economy. And I think that everybody expects the next 2 years to be pretty rough. And if the economy doesn't do well, you won't have advertising volumes that are very high. And this is going to affect the bottom line of your newspapers and TV channels, all of whom are dependent on advertising to the tune of 90-95% of their revenue. The other guys are those who are able to forge a direct payment connect with their readers or viewers. You could either do this through subscriptions, in the case of, say, News Laundry, or magazines, newspapers, and so on, or you do it through donations. The Wire is a non-profit, so for us, donations are important. We don't have subscriptions. And I think that the quality of the news that you put out, the quality of the editorial, the editorial product will hopefully ensure that readers will continue to support the work that we do, either through subscriptions for those who have subscriptions, or through donations for those who function on the basis of donations. So I am actually, as far as The Wire is concerned, not pessimistic, because I think that it's at a time of economic and financial and even political crisis that mainstream media comes under the maximum pressure. And the more big papers and TV channels come under financial stress, the greater will be the likelihood of them soft pedaling on major issues and essentially of them towing the government line. So
it's a great time for us to report.
So the public's expectation from sites like yours, mine, Scroll and others is going to be that much greater. Or smaller papers, Business Standard, Deccan Herald, the Hindu. Hindu's not a small paper, but I'm saying that the public's expectation, Indian Express. So I would say that now is a great time for us to, through the kind of journalism that we do, to actually deepen our connect with the readers. And if we are able to do that and provide credible journalism that informs, that's courageous, that doesn't pull any punches, but that's responsible, factual, accurate, I think we will find readers, even in these difficult times, stepping up to support us. That's our experience over the past few months. I'm sure that's your experience too. And I think going ahead in the months and years, I'm pretty sure that our readers and viewers will want to ensure that the Wire and sites like ours continue to flourish.
So you're fairly optimistic.
For ourselves, yes, but I worry about the big media organizations and the people who work there. For them, I foresee a time of great financial stress. And as we know, the more financial stress there is on their owners, the more supine those media channels and newspapers tend to become. And that's not good. That's not good.
Because at least with advertising, if corporate advertising will dry out, I guess, in the next 1 year. And if you're going to only have to depend on government advertising, then you can pretty much forget reporting on the government.
Well, we saw how the Hindu was penalized after its series on Rafale. In the run-up to the last election, they lost DAVP advertising. Now, it didn't matter for the Hindu so much, but the effect on smaller papers of the government or state governments withdrawing ads can be quite catastrophic. So I think that this is not a good time for papers who are dependent on advertising, and maybe this is the time for them to actually, newspaper prices are very low in this country, and this is what has made them more dependent on advertising income than is really healthy. So maybe now is the time for newspapers to think about having a more equitable, having just slightly higher prices so that readers who are otherwise quite happy to pay, 15, 20 rupees for a cup of tea or coffee, but insist on paying only 4 or 5 rupees for a newspaper, at least the English ones, that they look into maybe slightly higher prices.
Great. Thank you so much for talking to us. I'm just going to go back to that one question that I asked you because I feel I haven't got a satisfactory response.
Sure.
Which is that
Which one?
You said you've been dealing with like 14 cases, or that you've had a lot of cases. Just to my mind, reading Mrityunjay's tweet, it seems like a bit of an ego issue. It seems like he's upset that you have not apologized or deleted. Do you think you could have just avoided one more case to your kitty by just maybe deleting the tweet or apologizing it in the way that he wanted it?
Honestly, when I tweeted the clarification,
it's not about apology.
See, when I tweeted the clarification and when we corrected the article, I hadn't seen his tweet, quite frankly, where he had made this demand. And it's not a big deal either way. Honestly, there's no ego here. I took a call based on what I considered to be the gravity of the mistake. And to my mind, the quote was really quite incidental to the point that paragraph was making. And on that basis, I proceeded with the clarification I issued and the correction that we made in the story. But as I said, there's no ego involved here. I proceeded on the basis of my reading of what was required. And, so that's all I can really say about
And I think there's definitely no doubt about the fact that if you look at the central issue, which is a misquote, and compare it to the charges in the 2 FIRs, it's a definite overreach. I don't think anyone can argue against that.
No, which is why I come back to the point I made, which is that, to my mind, I think that, for them going after, there is a reason why they're going after the wire. And, there's a reason why you want to send cops all the way during a lockdown and ask me to be present there during a lockdown. So clearly they want to try to make an example of me and the wire as a way of sending a message to the media as a whole. And I think our fraternity has recognized that, which is why there's been an outpouring of support from journalists, the Editors Guild, and not just in India, but around the world, people, media organizations. We had a former president of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation sign our petitions, sign a statement calling for the charges to be dropped. So around the world, journalists and those who know the way journalism functions essentially recognize what is happening here, that this is a kind of intimidation which is being executed. I think there is a dual crisis for media freedom in this country. That on the one hand, media that is objective, critical, and independent, you will try to silence and browbeat and criminalize by flinging all kinds of accusations. Whereas media that actually could credibly be accused of breaking the law, for example, the way in which these channels covered the Bandra railway station incident, willfully bringing Muslims in, willfully bringing a mosque in,
talking about the masjid.
Exactly. So I have yet to hear of any state government saying that this is unacceptable coverage. And, we know that kind of coverage has fed this kind of hysteria where Muslim vendors are being prevented from selling their, poor Muslim vendors are being chased away. Hospitals, we saw a case in Meerut of a hospital saying we're not going to admit Muslim patients unless they can show that they're COVID negative. So you have evidence that the communal reporting of the Godi media is having real life harmful consequences. Yet you will not only not take action, you will actually applaud them, find 101 ways to support them. Right? So this dual crisis where you suppress what's good and encourage what is bad, I think this is, creating a very, very serious crisis for the media in India, and I dare say for democracy.
And when it comes to the UP government, they actually advertise with Sudarshan News, which is it's not even a news channel. It's a complete fake news hate factory. I won't even club it with right-wing media or favorable Godi media, what it's called. It's really a channel.
Right.
And the Uttar Pradesh government advertises with them.
There you go.
Yeah. There. Thank you so much. I hope there is no merit in these. I hope you're able to fight this off quickly.
Oh, we will.
Doesn't reach the courts itself, because it is quite a ridiculous charge against you. Thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck. And guys, if you like what Vaya does, please donate to them. We'll give you the link below this. Support independent media now more than ever, because you're going to have a lot of big media reporting on the things that the government wants to be reported on, because they're dependent on advertising. So support independent media, because we need you guys. Thank you.